Hi everyone, welcome to Goyo's podcast. We have today a very special guest, luminary, well-known figure in the cycling industry, Chris Cocalis of Pivot Cycles.
Hi, Goyo.
Hi,
Thanks
Chris.
for having me.
Welcome to the Philippines.
It's nice to be here.
Nice to be here. So, Chris, many people know you in the cycling industry as the head honcho of Pivot Cycles.
Yes.
So you've been in the industry for how long?
Well, since making my first actual bike frame, 35 years, 36 years-ish, but since actually starting to race BMX a lot longer than that, I was probably 12 years old. So
You started riding at 12 years old.
started racing at 12 years old, started hanging out at the bike store at 9 years old,
Wow.
taking out the trash for stickers.
So it started
Sometimes
there.
I still take out the trash for stickers. So.
Yes. So you used to race when you were younger,
Yeah.
BMX.
Mhm.
So we saw a picture actually of you. I think that was a few years old, racing a BMX. That was Gab showed us that picture last night.
Yeah, that was actually a mountain bike race.
That's a mountain bike race.
In
Okay.
1988. Yeah.
But you were racing shirtless that time, right?
I don't think the race had started. We were just
Okay.
we were at a race.
You were at the race, but it hasn't started. But
and I was doing laps ahead of time and everything. But yeah, it was. There was a lot of people lining the race course. It was pretty busy back then.
it's fun times, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get into manufacturing, or how did you get into? You started hanging out at bike shops. You started racing, but how did you venture into or jump into as a competitor into a manufacturer or producer of well-known bikes?
Well, back in the early 80s, BMX bikes pretty much came in one length. And as BMX progressed and there became, expert pro classes and people were making a career out of BMX racing, it was, the bikes didn't really keep up.
Okay.
And they were super short and squirrely. And I wanted to get a longer frame. And so I contacted a company that doesn't exist anymore. I think they were called Privateer, and they would actually build you your own frame. They were in California, and I designed a frame.
Okay.
This is when my sophomore year in high school, I think. And
Sorry, how old were you at this time?
16.
Okay.
And saved up my money and sent it to this company in California and waited, 6-8 months. But I drew up the frame of exactly what I wanted, and then eventually I got this frame, and it was super cool. Except I didn't really know much about geometry, and I had added so much length to the bike that I couldn't actually physically get out of the starting gate or wheelie the bike. The front end just would kind of stick to the ground. I had a friend who was just a monster. He was significantly taller than me, and he even had, as you can imagine, a harder time finding bikes. And I let him try it, and he thought it was the most amazing thing ever. So that was really my first foray into fitting bikes properly for the right size person.
But how did you keep staying in the bike industry? I mean, say that was the first bike you designed, right?
Yeah.
Then how did you start your company?
So I grew up in Chicago area in the US, and then moved to Arizona to go to university. And I actually picked Arizona because I used to go there for the winter nationals. I could race BMX pretty much every night of the week because of the nicer weather. That was my sole purpose in selecting that school. And then during that time, I started working at a bike store in Tempe, Arizona, and everybody was into mountain biking. Mountain biking was barely a heard of thing in Chicago.
Okay.
And didn't really even know what it was. And so being the BMX rat, those guys wanted to take me out and torture me, and they did. And I fell in love with it.
You were hooked.
I was hooked.
Yeah.
I was immediately hooked, and it was so much fun. But I had been through all the bike parts breaking in the early 80s, and square taper cranks and all that stuff going away on the BMX side. So by the time late 80s, BMX bikes were really dialed and things weren't breaking. And then here comes mountain biking, and it was worse than old BMX stuff. And so the first thing was I was just snapping bottom brackets and snapping cranks. And
How did you stop a bottom bracket?
just land from a jump and
Okay.
snap a bottom bracket.
Okay. Okay.
It's-
And that
yeah.
was a square taper that time,
A
right?
square taper. I mean, I swear to God, about every 2 weeks I was going through a bottom bracket spindle.
You were doing a lot of jumps.
Yeah, and so the bikes of the time just really couldn't handle that. And so the first thing is I had met somebody that owned a machine shop and was making some lightweight parts for triathlon, like super lightweight skewers, and I designed a bottom bracket and asked him to produce that for me. And the spindle was much larger. The bearings were kind of more offset to the outside, basically support the spindle
Yes.
closer to the crank arm. And then I would spray boxes blue, and my first company, I just called it Snake Cycles, and put bright pink decals on the boxes, cut out the foam with an X-Acto knife, and put the bottom brackets in and took them around to bike shops and sold them. And basically made better bottom brackets, and that's how I started. After that, I had left that bike store, was managing another bike store, and a gentleman came in, and he had welded a frame. He had just a backyard bike company, and the bike was pretty cool. It was an elevated chainstay bike and had a lot going on. I rode it around the parking lot. It wasn't straight. The geometry was horrible.
Yeah.
And it kind of looked like, even the top tube and the down tube, like somebody had just slapped stuff together. And he said he built it himself, and I said, I'm super into bikes. At my age, I thought I knew everything. And I said, if you teach me how to weld, I'll teach you how to build a bike properly. Of course,
Yes.
I knew nothing, but I thought I knew everything. But that Talon switchblade that we just launched with the 35 years in the pink
Yes.
Talon, the original one, that was my first frame
That was
35 years ago. So he taught me how to, that one was fillet brazed. He taught me how to braze, and built that frame, among others, the one in the picture where I'm jumping,
Yes.
basically in his backyard in the evenings.
Wow.
All hand drawings, all just blocks to hold the tubes at the right height.
And
Home Depot tubing benders, just
Wow.
electrician stuff, just simple stuff.
But that's what makes it more interesting, because at that time everything was new. There's so much you could do. Now it's I think a lot of the cyclists now, it's spoon fed, because they can get everything they want. They can just get it, right?
Yep.
Before, you had to make it yourself. Pivot Cycles, what are your plans for 2024? Like, what do you plan to do? What are your, just between you and me, like, the ones listening,
Nobody else is
no one
listening.
listening. What are your plans for 2024 and beyond? Like,
the regular bikes in our lineup that everybody is aware of and have gained notoriety, those are on a kind of normal cycle for refresh every so many years.
Yes.
It's not a big secret, but yeah, we're really excited about the stuff we're working on with the downhill team, and even the processes in house. So we started making the carbon tubes, making the aluminum lugs, and building those bikes entirely in house. So we just finished a batch of I think about 11 or 12 downhill frames, so that we can have both the Pivot Next Gen riders and the full downhill team all on those prototypes this year. And we've reached a point of multiple generations of that prototype, and even different designs that the public didn't see, that is heading towards production. So it'll be really cool when there's a 6-bar dual chain
wow.
pivot downhill bike.
Hopefully in 2025.
Yep, hopefully.
Oh, that's good. But okay, so you ride trails all over the world, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just like you cannot have your favorite kid or child, but do you have a favorite model of pivot?
I always say it's my typical response. It's always the next one, because when we're done, as we're finishing with one, I'm always on to the next one. But when I'm riding with customers, if I'm just going out for a regular ride, just my bike that I'm not testing stuff. I'm on the analog bike. I'm riding the Switchblade or the Trail 429 the most.
Okay.
And then on the e-bikes, definitely putting the most miles on the Shuttle AM, and probably nearly equal miles on the Shuttle SL.
So
Shuttle SL is super fun because it's almost like riding a regular bike, but you just feel like really good every time you get on it. It's like having your best day on the bike, and it doesn't feel like you're riding an e-bike.
It doesn't feel.
It's just so light, even when you put it on the bike rack or in your car.
It's not like the usual heavy.
Yeah, the lightest version of it's 36 pounds.
That's
so
not bad.
That's just
really good.
That's about what Eddie Masters' enduro bike weighs. So,
but speaking of e-bikes, there's a lot of. I think a few years back, the industry shifted to e-bikes, right? Or there's a lot of people getting into e-bikes compared to before. Do you think it's a state? You think there's still space in the industry for non-e-bikes or like enduro bikes that are?
Oh God, I hope so. I mean, it would not be great if it completely got replaced and you didn't have just regular full human power bicycles. I don't think that's going to be the case, but for a lot of people, especially we've seen it in Europe, that got into mountain biking during the pandemic. Mountain biking to them and e-mountain biking they're no different because that's all they've known is e-mountain biking, and they will probably never own a regular bike again unless they buy a pure downhill bike or something that's more of a bike park bike where they're still shuttling,
Yes. But it's okay.
I jokingly say, "Oh, I can't even ride that bike anymore,"
True.
but that's not true. But you look a few more generations beyond that, and you're back at 26-inch wheels, and you're like, "Yeah, not on the trails the way I like to ride today. I can't ride that." And not to say that that's going to happen with e-bikes. It's just like now you're making some decisions, and even traveling. I mean, at some point, solid state battery technology is going to come along, and the possible ability to just throw it in your bike box or bike bag and take it on the airplane with you, because that's a real challenge right now. If you want to travel globally with your e-bike, you can't take the battery.
You cannot.
And there's like 8 million batteries depending on what brand of e-bike, and so that's an issue as well.
Sure. Wow. So many things to look forward to. But Chris, mind me asking, is there something you'd like to, for people who ride a pivot, is there something you want to say to them, what to look forward to in the next few months or years, or you want to promote something about biking or biking to work, or encouraging people who have businesses to encourage their employees to use their bike to work, to commute, instead of hopping in the car and just driving to work?
Well, I mean, as a high-end, mostly mountain bike and gravel brand, and being a high-end version of that, we're all about the performance and the fun. So we want everyone to get to the level where they really enjoy their bike as a lifestyle and want more of it, and come to appreciate the highest end, most cutting edge equipment, and that even a novice level rider can get a big advantage from that, even more so than a pro level rider. Switching from one brand to a pivot, a lot of riders have great results when they switch, but the average rider can actually enjoy those benefits more of a lighter, better suspended bike, and that's what we want to promote. People having fun on bikes, and hopefully they find their way to pivot and get to experience what we do for them.
I have to mention, you had a bike before, a World Cup bike that was released, same specs as the World Cup rider.
Yeah.
And you released it, and there were a couple of guys who rode it in the Philippines. It was pretty impressive, the feedback they had on that bike. That was really nice. And
that's what, like, the downhill bike that Bernard and the team are riding now. the goal is to bring that pro level technology to everybody, and that's one of the coolest things about the bike industry is you're never gonna drive the Formula One car
Yes.
in the real world, but you can ride the exact same products that the best racers in the world are riding.
And that's what makes it even more fun.
Yes.
So, Chris, I know you're going to stay only a short while in the Philippines. Hopefully, we can invite you to come back to the
I hope
Philippines
so. Yeah, I'd like
and ride some of the trails here in the Philippines.
for sure.
Again, Chris, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Hope you have a safe trip back home and see you on the trail soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.